Once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's presentation, The Long Road to Conversion, the Digital Sales Funnel, presented by Esco Strong and Andrew Martin. It is my pleasure now to introduce your first presenter, Esco Strong. Esco, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Esco Strong. I'm a Senior Group Manager with the Atlas Institute, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today to learn more about our latest digital marketing insight, The Long Road to Conversion. We've got the study's author, Andrew Martin, here to share the findings with you, which we are very excited about, and we think all of you will also find very interesting and hopefully something to be excited about as well. As we really redefine a concept that has been sort of lost in the transition from traditional marketing to online, which is that sales funnel concept, which is ironic since online media has really held the promise of accountability and measurability, which is something that we haven't fully captured. So, as you know, at the Atlas Institute, we've actually done a lot of work over the last couple of years with regards to the idea of better measuring and optimizing media online, most notably our work with engagement mapping, which many of you have probably heard about. And we believe that this research, while it stands alone on its own merits, is just another piece of that puzzle in terms of truly measuring the effectiveness of ads online that really goes quite nicely into a lot of those other concepts, certainly including engagement mapping that we've talked about before. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Martin.
Thanks, Esco. Once again, thank you for coming to the conference here. For those of you on the West Coast, this is right after your lunch, so please don't let the food come and take you. In fact, I'm hoping that as publishers that you all stand a lot to learn, and think you should all come out of this really excited and fired up and feeling a lot better about the online advertising inventory that you've got for sale, and that you'll find that there's a lot more value in it than you might expect. Now, why I say that is because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the way digital media performs, especially when it comes to this notion of time and how does it play out and how does it in the story of the purchase funnel and in general and how it affects the way we think about the complexity of online advertising. So with that, let me talk a little bit about the complexity. What you see on this slide here might be familiar to you if you've seen something about our engagement mapping. And what this is it's a hypothetical conversion history. So each little circle represents one ad event, an impression or a click that went to this converter before they made the conversion. And as you can see, it comes from, these events come from different channels and different types of publishers, video, portals, social media, and different kinds of channels such as search. Now, this is already a pretty complex picture, but there's one thing that's been missing from this explanation, and that's time. We know that, campaigns don't just reach people across different channels. They reach people over an extended period of time. But we don't really know exactly how extended that is. Is this a question of days, weeks, or months? But we do know that time is important because time plays out in how you message to consumers and in the expectations you'd have for the media that you're publishing. And let me give an example. So for those of you who are in the room, don't recognize that right away. That's an iPod Touch in the hands of the still frame advertisement here I picked off of Hulu. You see this in-stream video ad was played in the middle of the Daily Show. So think about the kind of audience that Apple's reaching with this. And also, this ad, has very little text in it. Really, it's mostly watching people play different games. Now, I would argue that, as an ad, Apple probably thinks about this more like they think about their traditional TV buys than they would perhaps a banner or a text link. And that, as publishers, in-stream video functions much more like TV, and we should think about it more like TV. Now, compare this with this sort of rich media pop expansion that for the nanochromatic ad. You see it's on CNET, it's on the home page. It's really getting in your face. It's definitely meant to draw attention, maybe even to draw clicks. And it's not a mistake that this ad has appeared here, because look at the review tab there. There isn't just technology news on CNET. It's really one of the default places people go when they want to do research before they buy a product. And then finally here, let's look at the Google search results. And here's what would happen if you typed in the navigational keyword, iPod Classic. So you've already figured out that you were interested in iPods and even the particular brands from some other advertisement. And here you see, we don't see pretty colors, and this isn't about video. It's really about text links. It's about getting you to a place where you can, make a sale, or where you can, go and have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who has the product. So here again, the advertising is functioning differently. And what this gets back to time is that it brings us to this concept of the digital purchase funnel, and really the concept of the purchase funnel in general. It's been with us as marketers for over 100 years, and it's the idea that consumers pass through different stages before they make a purchase. First they need to become aware of a product and a service and a brand that might meet some of their needs. Then they go through and they consider and they do research. And then finally they go into what I have labeled as pursuit here, or other people have called this the idea of a shopping phase, in which they really go out and they look to visit a few merchants and then sign up for a service or make a purchase. What I'd argue is that, from a publisher's perspective, these three different publishers that I've highlighted that Apple is using for their advertising, have an affinity to a particular part of the digital purchase funnel. Hulu acts in the awareness stage. It's a great place for building brand, and works a lot like TV. Whereas Google is great for navigating the particular merchants and making that final sale. And CNET is a great place when you want to do product research and where you want to reach people who have a particular high likelihood of being interested in buying technical gadgets. So purchase funnel, that's what it's about. Of course, in the online context, we really don't think about it a lot. In fact, some people think it doesn't exist at all. Here's a quote from Business Week, the headline. It's read, "Google says the old sales funnel theory is dead." And this article went on to talk about how Google thought that the sales funnel didn't begin until somebody did a search and ended about half an hour later when they bought something. And another sort of way of looking at this comes from Avanish Kaushik, who wrote Web Analytics an Hour a Day. I picked this quote off of his blog. He wrote it about a month ago. It reads, "It turns out that most online marketers tend to think of life, online at least, to be all about one-night stands. Come, wallet out, convert." Now, what Avanish is getting at here is that when it comes to the way we measure the performance of our online media, we really do have this one-night stand mentality. It really is all about, were you the last click? Were you the last view? What did you get me to buy? Now, spelling error notwithstanding, there's something else in this quote that I don't quite agree with Avanish on. I don't think that most online marketers, think about their media as one-night stands. I think that's just how they measure it. In fact, Apple is a great example of somebody who's clearly planning around the idea of the purchase funnel, and I think most advertisers in their agencies do explicitly or implicitly think about online media the way they think about traditional media. But as an industry, we're profoundly ignorant. The reason we have this debate that rages around the purchase funnel and these metrics that don't match to the way we think about things, that we don't know some answers to some basic questions about timing online with advertising. We really don't know how far back advertisers are reaching their in-market consumers before they make a purchase. We don't really know with how much across all these campaigns. And in a bigger picture way, no one's really been able to say for sure or prove without a shadow of a doubt that the purchase funnel does or doesn't exist. And that's really the jumping off point for this research. Was I wanted to go out and answer these questions because I think these results are really interesting and have profound implications for the way we optimize and measure media. Now, before I jump into the data specifically, I want to talk a little bit about how we set this up. We took 67 million different conversions that happened over Q2 and Q3 of 2008, sort of pre-financial crisis and pre-Christmas mode, And we looked at their histories from the day they converted all the way back to 90 days before they converted, and wanted to see what publishers showed up in these histories, how far back and when. And we actually did this for 250 different advertisers across a lot of different verticals and running on over 1,000 different publishing sites. And what we found was that these relationships went a lot longer than we would have guessed. Let me just talk about through this chart a little bit and how we made it. Again, this is data that comes from those 67 million conversions. These are actually averages across all 67 million different individual conversions. So what you can read this is as, at 1 day prior to conversion, so in that last 24 hours, there was literally an average of over 2 ads being served to a consumer in that 24 hours before they converted. And that's, again, the average that comes across from 67 different individuals across the 250 advertisers and 1,000 sites. And what we mean by events is clicks or impressions. So these two events could have been an impression or a click, or 2 clicks or 2 impressions, or even a rich media interaction or 2. Now, what's interesting about this data is that right away, already when you look at 1 to 2 days, there's a lot of different events that are being served to consumers from the advertisers that they go on to convert it. And 2 days, you've got 5.5 events on average in a conversion history. And it keeps going up as we walk through 7 days to 14 days. At 30 days, we have almost 14 events in a conversion history from an advertiser. And it goes all the way back to 90 days, where we have almost 19 events in the average conversion history, all about the same thing, coming from the same advertiser. So this is a real surprise. I think it'll surprise everybody today. And what we find out is that our relationships that we have with consumers online aren't merely measured in days or hours or even weeks. Consumers have been reached months before they make a purchase. Now, that's just not how we think about things right now. And even more interestingly is when they're reached by this many different ad events, you can bet that these are coming from 3, 4, maybe even 5 publishers or more. So that hypothetical conversion history that we'll be seeing again, that's actually pretty true to form. Now, another thing that we can talk about is, well, hey, maybe there really is a digital purchase funnel then. And that actually leads to, wow, I need to hit the other button. That leads to this chart. And what this shows is, again, we take those 67 million different individual conversion histories and say, all right, where do we find the search publishers? Where do we find the news publishers, the social media publishers, the internet music publishers? Where do they live on average in these individual conversion histories? And then aggregate this all together to find out, where in general do these publishers categories live? So, for example, it turns out at the very bottom of the conversion funnel lies search and affiliate publishers. They actually manage to deliver most of their interactions to consumers in the 24 hours prior to conversion. Oftentimes it's literally minutes or hours before the conversion. So they really manage to reach consumers in a very narrow time right before they convert. And this is, again, kind of what we'd expect. We know that search has a very navigational nature to it and that it really is a great tool for closing deals. Now, we have to go back another 8 days before we reach the first display publisher, the auto verticals of publishers. And then there's another gap before we sort of reach the rest of the contextually targeted publishers, finance, telecom, and whatnot. And then we go all the way back to the top of the funnel with photo sites at 31 days. So, the big takeaway, of course, from this is that there's really only 1 or 2 types of publisher categories that live at the very bottom of the conversion funnel, and almost every other publisher lives somewhere in the middle at least 2 weeks out, or even further up near the top at 3 or more weeks out, along with photo. Let me talk a little bit more about what's going on in the sort of middle parts of the funnel, since most of the publishers that are on this presentation today probably live in the funnel, somewhere in the middle. what's going on when you look at, travel, finance, jobs, telecom, these are all publishers that have, these are all publishers with sites, like CNET or like, say, some site that lets you pick and compare mobile phone plans or compare, online trading platforms, or in the case of travel, do things like, travel search with Kayak or Expedia, Hotwire, etc. These are really places where you can do research to make a purchase that you can make online. So all of these 4 different areas, finance, travel, telecom, which is really mobile phone providers and, IP telephony for the most part, all are really strong, online business models. And, there's a bunch of sites have cropped up to let people do their research. And they're great places to show advertising when you want to reach somebody, when they're going to be making a purchase, maybe not in the next half hour, but, maybe in the next couple of days. So that's why they tend to be lower in the funnel than some of the other display publishers that would be more traditional, such as news, sports, entertainment. And as we get up here to, social media, video, and music, what we get to are sites where you go to that website not because you're doing research or because you're looking to, click through to some other website so you can make a purchase, or you're going to share photos or to get online and chat with somebody and catch up with your friends, or listen to music while you're at work in the case of internet radio, which is a lot of the music category. So it's not a surprise that these sites live higher in the funnel. In fact, all in all, what these results say is that there really is a pretty strong digital purchase funnel, and it breaks out in the way that we might expect from theory. There's great places like video and music where you can build awareness. Social media is also in that category. There's places where people do research, and we have sites where you can advertise there. And then there's, search at the bottom of the funnel, which probably is one of the best navigational tools on the internet, and certainly maybe ever invented, for getting you from into the doors of a store or a merchant. So let me talk about the implications of this a little. So imagine we sort of have this stylized, inverted pyramid here that's the purchase funnel. We've broken it up into 4 different weeks. You've got search and affiliate networks at the bottom, showing up a couple days to a couple hours before conversion. You have almost every other kind of publisher category living in this 2 to 3 week band. And then you have this area at the bottom I'm going to highlight in red ever so subtly. And what this shows you is that area in red is where the last ad is likely to be served. Most advertisers who are running very large campaigns will serve the last ad to somebody who converts within about 3 to 5 days before conversion, because it's not that hard to find somebody with a search engine or at one of those websites where they can do research. And it really shows that online advertising is doing their job well at finding people at the bottom of the funnel. And certainly that's been helped by having the last ad ROI to guide us. Of course, the problem with the last ad ROI is that most publishers don't live at the very bottom of the funnel. In fact, most of the publishers live in the middle. So it's not a very fair guideline. And certainly, we might want to use some other way of measuring that takes into account all the interaction delivered to converters and says that there's some value in reaching somebody a month ago versus that's also not zero, which is what the last ad model really tells that publishers are worth that live in the top part of the funnel. Now, this also isn't a zero-sum game. ESCO authored some research about search and display synergy a few years ago. And the upshot of this research is that by making good and smart display buys, you can actually grow your search conversion. So in other words, you can feed the bottom of the funnel by making smart buys in the middle and the top. I've actually picked, through some of these data that's been run for clients over the years and aggregated them together to sort of give you an average for 3 different publishers here. So, for example, the Yahoo Premium Display Inventory on their portal has actually an average synergy of 47% from our reports. 24/7 Real Media, which is an ad network, another category that lived on that publisher chart I showed just a few slides back, it has another positive synergy. And here, interestingly enough, on TripAdvisor, it's a synergy over 50%. So, as publishers in the middle and the top of the funnel, you really do influence the behavior of consumers later on in this process and really are adding value. And, and display advertisers, they're still learning about the importance of planning across the entire funnel. And then the real need to do integrated planning so they can feed the lower parts of the funnel with the top part of the funnel and make sure they have a strong plan at the bottom of the funnel too, so that people go onto the websites and purchase and sign up for things and download. Now, there's another trend that's, again, sort of a consequence of this one-night stand mentality that Avinash talks about, which is, this race to shorten conversion windows. And why this matters is because, as you can see from this hypothetical history down here, the last week in somebody's conversion history is different than the weeks before it. In fact, because now that you've seen the slide about the digital purchase funnel, you should be pretty convinced, in fact, that this is a history that's pretty true to form. Video and social media live back higher in the funnel than the portals and the ad networks will. Because the ad networks, you're incentivized right now under the last ad model to find the display media that's as far down the funnel as you possibly can. The problem with this is that advertisers, because they can only see the last ad right now, and it shows up in maybe a week before conversion at latest, that they have this tendency on their high-value action tags, their purchase confirmations, their process registrations, their downloads, to use very short conversion windows. In fact, 75% of them use conversion windows that are 2 weeks or less. So you can see what this does is it throws out the contributions that publishers higher in the funnel have made. And, this doesn't do the advertiser any good, of course, because, now they've lost those sites that are driving synergy. And as publishers, of course, it zeroes you out. In fact, if this advertiser was to adopt an advanced ROI method like engagement mapping that could measure all the touch points before conversion, it wouldn't even necessarily make a big difference because these events aren't present. So what we recommended is that advertisers extend their conversion windows, bring back all the contributions in their conversion histories, because engagement mapping doesn't work either if you shorten your windows. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the what does this mean for advertisers slide, because this is about publishers, but it's helpful to know sort of how we think of what we'd like advertisers to do and what we think that they would be smarter advertisers for doing. One thing is to ditch the last ad model. I don't really think we need to have much more discussion about how inadequate it is to measure the real world of online advertising. Now that we know that there's multiple channels, multiple sites, and advertising takes place over a period of months and not days, the last ad model just isn't advanced enough to capture all this complexity. And even if you're a super DR advertiser, they can use engagement mapping to still reward sites that are low in the funnel without having to throw away and zero out everybody who made a contribution higher up. Similarly, this race to shorten conversion windows, cripples engagement mapping. And in a more fundamental level, advertisers are paying you publishers that live in the middle and upper parts of the funnel lots of money to show ads, and they throw the data away. That just makes no sense. Finally, for advertisers, of course, and as a publisher, you should be encouraging your advertisers to do this, which is to make sure that you're being third-party tracked. Now, you might not necessarily want to use something like the Atlas Media Console to do all of your management of a campaign across all the different channels, but nonetheless, having it third-party tracked allows advertisers to do analyses to see the entire purchase funnel, to do things like engagement mapping so that they can reward the contributions made across the entire funnel. And again, as publishers, many of you have undervalued inventory because your advertisers aren't tracking through the entire funnel and are measuring you with the last ad model. And that really brings me more naturally to sort of what does this mean for publishers? Well, we really think that there's a lot of data in this presentation and in the DMI that you should be using to have conversations with your advertisers. And in these conversations, talking about, hey, how are you measuring your campaign's performance and how have you set it up? What length are your conversion windows? advertisers using third-party ad serving through the Media Console and through Microsoft, they have the ability to actually do a conversion funnel analysis. So you can find out exactly where you live in the advertiser's conversion funnel, and that'll let them do better messaging and better targeting to the audiences on your site. And hopefully they'll find you more valuable because they better understand the kinds of contributions you're making. Similarly, if they have really short conversion windows and you live near the top of the funnel, that's a conversation you might want to have about how they're throwing out the contributions you make. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions, but before that, we're going to sort of hand it over to Chris. And also, for those of you who like to multitask, you can see we've got some information up on the slide here. If you want to go read the text of the DMI, there's the link. If you're interested in some of the other research that we've cited during this, the search display synergy, the overlap research, navigational search, that's all available on the Atlas Institute site, and also our contact information. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Chris to remind you all how to put in questions, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. As a reminder to everybody, you can ask questions through the Q&A pane. To do that, just go ahead and click on the Q&A in the upper left-hand corner of the client. It'll bring up a box where you can go ahead and type in your question next to the Ask button, and once you have typed in your question, click Ask. Please note that you can edit your question, but if you do edit your question, your original question will be removed from the active queue and replaced by the edited version. Also, you can only have one question at a time in the active queue. I would also like to remind everybody that you are able to print a PDF copy of this PowerPoint deck by either right-clicking on the slide that you are seeing now, or in the lower right-hand corner, there is a printer icon that you can click. You will be able to download a copy of the PowerPoint deck in a PDF version and print it from there. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor back to Esko to answer and address your question. Esko, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So we do have one question. It's with regards to how site efficiency in terms of actually displaying ads, so the cleanliness of the site, whether there are fewer or more ads, or whether the ads are easier to see, whether that was measured in this study and if that's part of the effect that's going on.
This study actually didn't take variables such as ad size or their location above or below the fold into account. And I also believe that the search and display synergy work is also does not take those considerations into account. And nonetheless, though, we do see those synergies, and we do see this digital purchase funnel show up, irregardless of how busy a page is. Although, as this questionnaire is getting at, it is, of course, possible that when you load up a portal's front page that you're being reached by 3 different advertisers. But I don't think that's a very important factor in all of this.
All right, we've got another question with regards to how reliably a publisher can actually look at these results to determine where they are in the funnel. How concentrated is their actually delivery according to where they're showing up on the funnel site?
Sure. Well, and let me break that up into 2 pieces. One is, of course, the most direct way to answer this question is to get in contact with your advertisers who are being third-party tracked through Microsoft's Atlas console, and ask them to run or ask them to see their conversion funnel analysis, because that analysis will show the range of time over which you deliver to their funnel. Now, of course, the points on the slide about the purchase funnel, those are medians. Obviously, different publishers do deliver their interactions over a spectrum of time. What I can tell you is, as a general rule, is that people at the bottom of the funnel deliver most of their interactions in a very short period of time. So the search engines and the affiliate networks, they deliver over 50 to 75% of their actions in really a period of 3 or 4 days. And in the case of the search engines and affiliate networks, they actually deliver something like 60, 70% of their interactions entirely to converters in the last 24 hours. Now, as you move up the funnel and you go through autos and some of the other categories like telecom and finance, those tend to be spread over a week. And what we see is that these places that I mentioned that were good for awareness, if you're a publisher that you live high in the funnel, what really distinguishes you as somebody high in the funnel is that you reach somebody oftentimes, a month or more before they're going to make a conversion, and you actually continue to reach them with advertising, oftentimes up into the last few weeks before conversion. But you're just not very likely to reach somebody in the last days and hours before conversion.
Very good. We have another question with regards to the importance of advertisers to consider the funnel as well. In addition to publishers, and what are some ways that we can challenge advertisers to also take this information into account?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things you can do. I mean, of course, just having education. There was a seminar for advertisers this morning that'll be posted online next week, so you can have your advertisers watch that and read the DMI. Again, if they run these reports that are available, if they're Microsoft advertisers, such as Search and Display Synergy and Conversion Funnel Analysis, you can have a really direct discussion about, how by buying you as a publisher, you're feeding lower parts of the funnel. And really, the advice I give to advertisers, and I think, it's important that they hear from their publishers as well, is that they want to be planning along an entire purchase funnel and, measuring performance like the entire funnel existed. They're better at the planning part unless somebody starts pressing on them really hard about budgetary considerations, and then they fall back on their inadequate measurement that they have from their last ad CPAs. So, conversations about using engagement mapping, and about researching your contribution to the funnel, and that, it's pretty well established that there really is a synergy with the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel that feeds the bottom. So that would be the kinds of information I would use. And then, in the future, keep your eye out. We're working on some publisher engagement mapping offerings that may appear, maybe not in the next 6 months, but further out from that, to give you some more direct information to use in your conversations with your advertisers.
Okay, we have a question that sounds somewhat similar to that one with regards to how a publisher, what are next steps for publishers from this? How can they actually, other than showing this research to their clients, how can they actually make something like this actionable for them and take advantage of this data?
Well, again, I think if you want to be actionable in the short time frame, it's really all about asking your advertisers, what method are they using to measure you? Are they using the last ad model, or are they using some engagement mapping model? So, because you want to know what your engagement mapping CPA is, not necessarily what your last ad CPA is. The last ad CPA is great if you're a search engine because you live at the very bottom of the funnel. The last ad CPA is not doing most of the publishers in the room a favor. You want to find out your engagement mapping CPA at a minimum. Like I said, if they've done some of these other more advanced analyses like Search and Display Synergy or the conversion funnel analysis, you should try to get a hold of these so you can find out where you live in their purchase funnel, where are you delivering your interactions, and how much lift to their search conversions you might be providing. We have other questions?
I'm going to give about another minute or so to see if we have any other questions come through. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions at this time. Actually, there's one more that came in. So the question is how publishers can find out whether any of their clients have actually done any engagement mapping or synergy analyses.
Again, this really does come out to reaching out and contacting them directly. I don't know whether or not, as Microsoft, we're allowed to release whether or not an advertiser has requested these reports. So it really does come down to what your relationship you have with your advertisers. I would suggest that start with your largest advertisers first. They're much more likely to have run these reports, and they're much more likely to be doing the basics right, like third-party ad survey. If they're not doing that, if they're not third-party tracked, they haven't done any of that work yet.
All right. It looks like there are no other questions at this time. One last bit that I'll add to this discussion is, we feel that this research is something that is actually good news for both sides of the equation in terms of publishers and advertisers. And the discussion around, measuring that funnel and optimizing around that funnel is not one that has to be adversarial. It's something that I think, again, both parties stand to gain a lot from understanding how that works and understanding how all parts of the funnel are working together. And so, we'd really encourage you guys to actually reach out and get those conversations started. Us as the technology provider and the third-party ad server, we're certainly trying to do our part to get those conversations started as well. And again, we're very excited about this research, and we want to help people take advantage of research. So I thank all of you again greatly for taking the time to join us for this webinar. And any further follow-ups, I'd encourage you to reach out to either a Microsoft salesperson or certainly give the paper a read online, or send an email to the contact information that's on the slide that's up right now. So thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much, Esko. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our presenters, Esko Strong and Andrew Martin, for presenting today, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's Microsoft webcast. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.